All right, it is Sunday, September the 8th. I'm with Bill Matthews, Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, 1968 to 69. What is your full name, sir?
William John Matthews,
When and where were you born?
Youngstown, Ohio, 12/2/1949.
And for your perspective, being born in Youngstown, Ohio, what was it like for your childhood growing up in that period?
Well, actually, my folks divorced when I was 1 year old. I mean, my dad was in Korea. So we went back to Norfolk, where my mother was from. And the childhood was, it was a blue-collar neighborhood. Um, it was a little rough around the edges, but it was a good neighborhood to go in. There's a lot of kids, a lot of sandlot sports, and we had the beach. And that's where we spent most of the time, especially in the summer.
You like to do a lot of surfing.
When we get a chance, yeah.
For your perspective, especially in those teenage years, what were some of your hobbies outside of course, spending time in the beach in itself? Well, what else did you do?
Yeah, I did a lot of reading. Where our house was located was next to a marshland that went out to a small lake, and then eventually went out to the bay. So I spent a lot of time down there watching nature, quite honestly, way in the back part of our property. A lot of sandlot, football, and you name it, softball, and a lot of kids. And when it was raining, we go inside and play hearts or play spades or something like that. But it was a good neighborhood for a boy to grow up in.
Oh, certainly. Now, from your point of view and perspective, when did you start hearing about what was happening in Vietnam?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, in high school, when at Granby High School, which is one of the Norfolk high schools, three of them, there was some chatter amongst the boys, but I don't really remember it being a big topic other than the fact that it was being shown every night on TV. So that was like our entry into what was going on in Vietnam.
Well, and yourself, I mean, you end up in the Marine Corps, right? What leads you down that path to the Marine Corps?
I grew up in a Navy town, and it's funny. There was a little rivalry between Navy and Marines, and we're all one big family, don't get me wrong. But with the bars and the restaurants, and you saw a lot of Navy and a lot of Navy and a lot of Navy, so you kind of like, oh, I don't want to be that. I want to be something that is rough and tumble. So, and I'm not putting the Navy down; they're great, but that's what drove me towards Marines. They seem to show so much pride.
Now, when you went to enlist in the Marine Corps in itself, do you remember that day?
Well, I remember that day, but prior, I had gone downtown Norfolk to enlist in the Army, and I was 17. I required my parents' signature, and they did sign off on it. But the recruiter talked me out of it. He said, "You really need to go back to school." So I did, but that didn't last very long. I was right back down there, but this time I went to the Marine Corps recruiter, and he signed me up quick.
So, what led you to quit school and why get into the Marines so quick?
I'd be honestly, I got into drinking, and we would skip school to go visit other schools to see our girlfriend that might be in another school, and that got us in trouble. Some of the nightlife, I was going down the wrong road, and I knew it. So I said, "Hey, I got to straighten this up. I got to do something different. I'm going to be in big trouble."
And the Marine Corps shifted that path.
Absolutely.
Now, for you in itself, you enlist, you get down to Paris Island. What time of the year were you down in Paris Island?
January,
How
which
was
was
that?
best time to be down there, because January in South Carolina is not bad. Summer, and that was a whole different story. My cousin went through in the summer, and he paid the price. Now, January was good. January 11th is when I put my feet on the yellow footprints.
In that moment, what's going through your mind standing on those yellow footprints?
Did I make a bad decision here? These guys yell a lot.
With that being said, thinking about your instructors and that first week, what's that first week like from your perspective?
Oh gosh, it was the one strong suit that I could play was that coming from Ocean View, you kind of had to get tough. So I was bringing, even though I was small, I wasn't intimidated. So as far as the other recruits, I was fine with that. I think it might be going on, But getting used to having all my hair cut off, what we used to call chip beef on toast, was not the Marine Corps version of chip beef on toast. So
Shit on a shingle.
oh, it was terrible. But getting used to the regiment, the time of getting up in the morning, and then everything being regimented was probably what you had to get used
to. And so, thinking about that pace in itself, of that very strict, rigid environment,
mm-hmm.
as that builds up, where the drill instructors in itself start, the longer you're there, they start taking it back a little less on you.
Mm-hmm.
Realize it. When you get to that point, what is the middle of boot camp like for you in itself? What's going on around that midpoint where you're no longer there, fresh off the bus?
Trying to do your best at the task that you're assigned. Just trying to be better and being able to help the guy next to you. There's a lot of bonding going on in Paris Island. And so, yeah, and a lot of it I enjoyed. I enjoyed the bugle stick fighting and the obstacle courses the most. I had never fired a rifle, so that was brand new. I mean, coming from beach town, we weren't doing any hunting or anything. We spent our time on the beach, obviously. So that was new to me.
So for yourself, handling the M14 for the first time,
mm-hmm.
Learning that weapon, you're out there in itself, and you're studying the sights before you do the live firing.
Right.
So what were you anticipating that first round when it finally went down range?
I didn't think it would be that much kick. I said, "Oh man, this is a new experience right here." You see all this stuff on TV. You go, "Oh no, they pull the trigger. It's just the bullet goes. It's not a big deal." And, M14 is a pretty powerful weapon.
Well, and being on the rifle range in itself, there are also a very strict set of rules you have to follow out there. Yeah. Otherwise, someone's going to step in and intervene.
Mm-hmm.
Did you witness any of that on the rifle range?
No, I didn't. The only thing that I had go awry on the rifle range was shot a Maggie drawer on one of the shots I took, and PMI is the primary marksman instructor, and he was not happy with me. And the boot camp back then was a little bit different. They could hit you. So the drill instructor came up. He says, because I bucked my rifle, I bucked it when I made my shot, and he made me pay for it. And when the drill instructor came back, he said, "Recruit, what's going on with your face?" I went, "Fell down, sir." So because there was a code there, because you're gonna have to be dealing with that PMI. And I'm not taking away the Marine Corps discipline because it works, and I support it. I mean, a bruise here, a bruise there, that didn't bother me.
Well, and through that, in many ways, that toughness mentality in itself, setting that standard, I mean, you learn from that mistake really quickly. You don't want to have that to happen again.
I mean, there wasn't any broken bones or
right.
No stitches. Everything else would heal.
Well, and with your boot camp platoon in itself, how many guys were in there around the same time you were?
Oh gosh, those numbers are hard for me to think about. I guess we had. I guess it's platoon size. That's a wild guess. I do know in the formations it always seemed larger than we were in numbers. Yeah, I guess about like platoon size.
Did you get close with anybody in boot camp?
I did. One fellow, and I had to go back to my book because you get like your school, your yearbook, where you kind of get one of those from Paris Island to find his name. But he was from Ohio, and he had a great sense of humor. He was Italian, and we would always get in trouble together. He would screw up, and then I would be right next to him, and then we'd both suffer, or vice versa. He was a great guy, and I never saw him after that. And there was one fellow from California, and he came in, and he was one of the reserve Marines, sharp as a tack, nice as heck guy. The funny story is he was Catholic, and I decided to go to church with him. And they did communion, and I took communion, and after we were leaving, he goes, "You weren't supposed to do that, but it's okay."
Well, what other odds and ends, and do you remember about boot camp in that sense?
Gosh, the food, you were hungry all the time. And so you'd chow down. You didn't have a whole lot of time to eat. But the milk, man, I just loaded up on milk. Well, I was small. I was like probably 145, 150 pounds. So they wanted me to put weight on. So they encouraged me. They kind of they had a way of encouraging you to do that. But looking forward to Parents' Day was a big thing. Looking forward to graduation.
So, what was Parents' Day?
Um, that was really neat because you did the formation. You're out there on the parade deck, and you went through all the drills. And you hoped you weren't the one rifle that when you released your not the trigger, but the bolt, that you weren't the only sound, you know, or when you locked it, you were the only sound that didn't release it. You were so afraid you're going to make that sound because everybody's watching. You get all the platoons out there. That was tricky, and the drills were interesting because we used to play around with some. The drill instructors would make us play around with some of the drills, and that was kind of cool.
Well, when it comes to that mindset in itself, not wanting to mess up, not wanting to be that bolt, by that point, the Marine Corps has changed each and every single one of you in more ways than you can count itself, because you're no longer individuals. You are now learning what it means to be a United States Marine.
I could get real deep on that subject matter, but it put a sense of pride in me. It's funny because everybody talks about when Marines get out of boot camp and they come home and they think use the term, the biggest badass out there, no matter what size you are. And sometimes that didn't work too well for you. But no, I just was very proud of that accomplishment. It was one of my biggest accomplishments in my life.
So, with that being said, when graduation day rolls around and you're finally graduating and being recognized as a United States Marine, how does it feel?
It feels great. Man, there's so many adjectives that can describe that. But it is. It's just awesome. You're at the top of the hill.
And Mom come down in itself to watch graduation?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They were proud too. Take some neat pictures. But it just didn't last long enough.
So, upon graduation in itself, you graduated in the spring. Where was your next duty station?
Well, we went straight to IRT training. Well, Daryl took leave. We went to IRT training. And sure might have that backwards, but coming home, that was so cool because it was like for me, it was like starting a new life. But and it was the right time of year for me because January, February, it was still cool outside. You know? Put that in words, probably hit everything already to say how I felt about it being in the springtime. We knew we were heading to California for our jungle training. So that was on your list of next things to do. You really, your 30 days, you really took advantage of it.
Well, and for yourself, what was your MOS upon completion?
I was at 0351, which is rockets. So your designation is anti-tank assault man. And it's funny because that stuck with me, even though when I got in Vietnam, that was an antiquated MOS. So I carried either M16 or M79. But it's funny because I got up when I was in the Rotary Club. You have to get up and introduce yourself. And I got up in front of the Rotary Club and I said, I want you all to know that it was tough for me to get a job. When you have a title of anti-tank assault man, only Vinny down the street wants to use you.
Well, in your training further on within ITR itself, did you get to use any of those rockets and experiment with that MOS?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question, Zach. When I first got there, we had the big 0351 tubes, and they folded in half, and they gave me that, and they gave me 2 rounds, and it was bulky, it was tough to carry, but that's what I was, and that lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then that thing was gone. They took that thing and it was gone. And, they realized it was not. And then I had an M16, but I didn't have that long. I went to squad leader, maybe the M79 man. squad, and I really enjoyed that weapon. It was so versatile.
Well, and prior to getting to Vietnam in itself, when you're going through jungle training and you're in California, you know what that means. That after
Mhm.
this, that you've got orders bound for the Pacific Fleet, you will be in Vietnam.
Right.
So, what are they teaching you in jungle training?
Uh, it wasn't realistic. They tried, but what we got in jungle training, you were supposed to be like a prisoner of war. They went through that, put you in a camp, and you're supposed to escape, and then find your way back to headquarters. Their temporary headquarters, what they designated as headquarters. And so, you know, I was it. They like I say, they really tried to prepare you, and something that I learned in boot camp really was reversed in the jungle training. Reversed was that they kept going. If you goof up and you don't do well, you're going to be the point man, and that resonated with me. So, and I don't want to be the point man. So when I got over there, it was reversed. The point man was who you wanted to be confident, know what the heck he was doing, and alert. Because generally, when the NVA would attack, they'd attack for the middle of the column. I mean, obviously, lots of times the point guy got it, but ideally, they wanted to hit the middle of the column.
It split you, cut you off, and so
Mm-hmm.
either from that point forward, they can attack the front
Right.
half, the second half,
Mm-hmm.
overwhelm, destroy, and move on. Well, and for you too, when you got to Vietnam, and not to jump ahead, but it brings a point. You mentioned the point men within the platoon were phenomenal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you have Canada yourself out there, and this sense of being walking point and
Right.
understanding the nature around you.
Mm-hmm. It was in a kind of a way, and this is not to sound like love on my part, but a little exhilarating. You knew all your senses were geared, hooked in, rather than when you're in the back of the column and you just kind of following them all. I never had a problem with being pulled up to be point man. But now M79, you didn't have M79 generally on point. It happened.
Well, and leading up to that, you get your orders for Vietnam. Do you remember what day or around what month you arrived in country?
It was probably the latter part of May. Now it's funny because those dates, the first day in country and then the day coming out, a little hazy because both of them had so much anticipation. But it's funny because they told you when you get landed in Nang, off the plane, you start running because they're going to be shooting at you. Well, shooting at you, didn't they? No, I'm not saying they never got any rocket attacks, but man, you're geared up, you're ready to go. I'm sure those guys that were laughing as they saw the C-130.
Well, when you set foot in Vietnam in itself, it's spring leading into summer. I mean, what's going through your mind in itself? What's this climate, the smells like?
Oh, it's like being in a sauna. Hot as hell. It's humid. The other thing is you kind of like find your way around. It's not like somebody's there to pick you up in a bus to take you to your unit. You got to figure that out. You don't have somebody, hey, sir, come with us. No, it didn't happen. So, and then you wander upon a couple of Marines and that would be on your unit, and they were pretty cold, and I don't blame them because they'd just been through a major firefight and they lost a lot of their guys. So when that happens, you really don't want to get real close to the next new guy because they might not be there. You don't want that loss again.
Well, and for you, I mean, when you arrive in Charlie Company, this is right after the events of LZ Loon itself, where these
Mm-hmm.
guys had been through utter hell. And you and I have talked, well, you witnessed a lot of that, where a lot of these guys didn't get close, didn't really open up in itself.
Mm-hmm. I had a really good squad leader from the get-go, Douglas, and he'd been with a friend of mine, Terry Tillery, earlier on. But Douglas was kind of carefree, but he supported you. He built up your confidence real quick, even though he'd really seen it real stuff. So I was really pleased with that situation.
Well, when you arrived at Charlie Company in itself for your squad leader, what squad were you in?
I was in second squad, second platoon, second squad.
And so your squad leader was Douglas. Who was your platoon leader at the time?
At that time, well, we had a nickname for him, and I don't. I never knew his real. Probably knew his real name, but Lieutenant Dum Dum was what we called him. So he was an exception in the wrong direction for the Marine Corps in Vietnam, and that situation didn't last long.
Oh, well, I know also that Captain Negron at the time, the skipper, set a standard of how to deal with him after an incident of him shooting himself in the foot.
He did. He pretty much set the standard for him before that, but Negron knew he didn't belong in the field. He really belonged behind a desk.
Well, and who replaced Lieutenant Dum Dum?
Lieutenant, we call him Lieutenant Scar. His first name was Robin. He was in Pennsylvania, and he always walked like he was falling forward. He had a scar right down the middle of his forehead, and that's why we called him Lieutenant Scar. And that's what he wanted to be called, just Scar. Not that they just call me Scar. And he was eager. He was a leader's leader. He made you feel comfortable. At the same time, he was demanding. He had expectations, but he took care of his men.
Well, and that kind of leader that sets that standard, that gets down on a personal level. I mean, because he helped you write a letter home eventually in itself.
Yeah, well, it was funny. It's like I called it a rebuttal to a Don John letter, Dear John letter, and that happened probably, I guess, about my 6th or 7th month in contract, and we were sitting right next to the LZ because we were on alert. People call Bald Eagle. I guess it's got a couple other names for it. But we were sitting there like at 15-minute span. If something happened, we needed to be on the choppers. So you just anticipation. But we had that downtime. And I'd mentioned to him that I got a Dear John. And he said, well, we're going to sit down and we're going to write this rebuttal. And I'm sure we went to some of the Motown songs to get some verbiage. It was funny. It's like I said, now here is my platoon commander helping me with this rebuttal letter. He wasn't happy about it either. He didn't want any of his men to be unhappy. So that was his way of dealing with it.
Well, that kind of leadership, you would do anything for that man.
Oh, yeah.
In the field.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever he asked, did not ask, wherever he was going, you guys would have followed him to hell and back without question.
Absolutely.
And even with the time here over the past reunions, just from you alone, the pride that you show when you mention Scar and you think back on that, it's still evident some 55 years later.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I've seen him at a couple of the reunions, and when I have seen him at reunions, we would be away from everybody just sitting talking. It was a reunion, let's see, we had one reunion at the cabin here, and then we had one that I caught up with him down in Louisiana, New Orleans. We had a reunion down there, and that was great.
Well, in thinking about Squad Leader Douglas in itself, platoon leader, I mean, within 2nd Platoon, for your experience, you had some outstanding individuals in itself that really set the standard for the platoon. Excellent guys in itself. So when you were there, you're being welcomed in to under Squad Leader Douglas. Who are some of the guys that you're with in itself in 2nd Squad, 2nd Platoon?
Let me just step back a little bit and say about something about Douglas.
Go for it.
When he rotated out, he actually went and visited. Now, he's from Louisiana. He visited my parents in Virginia to sit and make them feel secure about what was going on as best he could. And that really meant a lot to me. But everybody had a nickname, but mine was just Matt for Matthews. It wasn't anything exciting. But you had Canada, and you had Arkansas, and you had Bully, and a lot of nicknames. But the one that stands out is Canada. He was an alien, actually, and he was from Canada. That's why we call him Canada. But he was another just true leader. He was tough, but he had that side of him. He took care of the guys with him. But he was bigger than life. I mean, he was. He was about 6'7". He wasn't that heavy because we're in heat season, so he lost a lot of weight. You kind of looked up, but he volunteered for everything. He was the leader of the pack.
Yeah, I remember you when we talked earlier this week. You mentioned anything something came up, he's putting his hand right up for it himself.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes you're right there with him.
Oh yeah, and I wanted to say, put your hand down.
Well, you guys get incredibly tight in itself, and so Canada. What's his full name?
Jmaeff. And Victor Jmaeff. And actually, his family came from Russia to Canada. was a religious persecution. But and I have a bracelet I wear because I lost him on March 1st, 1969. He was 15, 20 feet away from me, and that really sealed the deal for me. It was like, man, this is.
Well, and even prior to that, the stories about Canada that I've heard from you, other guys that were with Charlie Company at the time, I mean, it's almost something that sounds unbelievable until you start hearing the same story that's being told from a multitude of guys in itself. What was he like in the field?
He was aggressive. He carried the M60, which is usually a 2-3 man team, but he was a 1-man gunner with that M60, and he had it stripped down, so it was carryable. If probably a bad term for that, but it was easy for him to handle. And he had taken it to the Seabees to get it modified, so he could use. And we'd call him up to do a field of fire, and he easily could just let go with that thing. And we knew that whatever was out there, might have been out there, it was done. So, but no, he was. He moved to platoon sergeant. If it was a fill-in, I'm not sure if he got a designation, but that's what he did for a while. He did a great job. Just because, I mean, here he is just a corporal. Here he is in a platoon commander, I mean, a platoon sergeant position. But no, he was good.
Well, and when we were talking yesterday, we talked about that when Canada walked point, oftentimes in itself, he would get into contact.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of blood trails would be found. And it just speaks to the innate ability he had to sense the world around him and to sense that bend or what was out of place. And I mean, that saved a lot of guys' lives.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I can't say enough about his awareness and how to use his men around him and make them feel comfortable. As comfortable as you could get. He was like that seatbelt you have in your car. You're not going to go through the windshield. You have bumps and bruises, but you're not going through the windshield.
Well, and thinking about that, I mean, there's the combat stories of Canada, but there's also the funny stories in itself. There's a lot of those. And you've got plenty.
Yeah, I do. Canada came from, like I said, from Canada, and so it's a little bit different and when you're dealing with another nationality. We were one night, we're feeling pretty good. We're and one thing people look at Marines and Vietnam War is there's movies like Apocalypse Now that made it look like we were all drugged up when we were out in the field and just partying. That was all BS. The only time that we did anything close to that, we had beer or any other substance, we were in a secured perimeter. And we'd be in that secured perimeter for a couple of days, because then we'd go back out on operation for maybe 30 days. So it was your comfort zone, and you could kind of like relax. So, you'd write letters, you'd have conversation, you'd see reactions, relax. Once again, I've used that word, but Canada, we were feeling pretty good one night, and he said, Bill, I've got a sister. Okay, Canada. And when we get back stateside, I think it'd be great if you guys would date. And I said, okay, well, we'll do that. And he broke out some pictures, and I said, I want you to know this, Canada. I do have a girlfriend back stateside. So this might not be an appropriate thing to do, to leave my girlfriend back stateside. So we had a little understanding all of a sudden, but it was hard to say. You just didn't say no to Canada. You just kind of had a way of working around, that answer. But and the neat thing about it is I got a chance to talk to Helen several years back, and she was concerned about Canada. So I try to alleviate some of those concerns and some of what I was misleading statements about Canada in regard to this supposed samurai sword, which he had, but you didn't see him swinging around in firefight or anything like that. That was just one of the things. And he was a hard charger, like I said, but he wasn't reckless. And that's another thing that might have been brought out, but it was published or talked about. He was calculated.
Well, the think about that of what the Marine Corps taught him, but in many ways in itself, and what Harold's told me, what other guys have told me, is that he was a born warrior in
Mm-hmm.
itself. That's just what he wanted to do. That's why he came to Vietnam, to be in the Marines, to get in there and to fight. Because Harold's got some stories of just relaxing down at the washout in itself. Everything's cool. Not good enough for Canada because he wanted to be in the bush.
Yep. He had a saying. So he was there to do the job. He had a different term for it. I'm going to leave that term alone. But he came from a really good family. I wish I had had a chance to meet them. And I kind of regret not going up to that area in Canada and seeing Ellen, because I think it just solved some of her concerns, because she really was concerned about some of the things that happened. And I know his family was upset about his demise.
Certainly. Well, and when that happened in itself, we've talked, and Canada got a posthumous Navy Cross for his actions in that operation that day, and rightfully deserved. And before we get up to that, the area that Charlie Company was operating around at the time, we're right there along the DMZ.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't down south near Da Nang. We're talking strictly in VA in itself.
Yep.
So knowing that, there's not really booby traps in itself, but you are fighting hard, professional, trained fighters. What's that like in that perspective, knowing that you're going up against what the North Vietnamese considered to be their best?
And they were good. Their snipers are excellent. And I can remember times when they would hold down our platoon for hours with one or two snipers, because they would just blend in with the trees. And the guy would get up to move, and boom, shot. Um, they didn't leave their bodies. You would have thought that after a firefight you'd find NVA laying on the ground. It just didn't happen. It happened one time, and that was when we kind of surprised them, and we had a brief firefight, and we had one. He had a chest wound. You could tell he was not going to make it, and he was laying in the trail. That's the only time I could really remember coming up on the body. But other than that, there was blood trails. And this is the thing about it, I'm going to talk, because my first year of college I went to the Citadel on a veterans program. There was about 300 of us there. And I took an English composition course. And I wrote a paper requirement in the course. And I talked about the kills in Vietnam. I said, this is the way it goes, guys. And within the paper, I said, we would find a blood trail, and we would estimate how many we had killed. And that might be 5. Okay, well, by the time I got to battalion, it was 10. By the time I got pushed up, it was maybe 30. And that's the way the kill counts. And if you go back and start adding all these kill counts, I don't think there would be anybody left in North Vietnam. And that was false. It was false and misleading, and it should have been corrected right away, because then people would have had a true sense of what was going on in Vietnam. I got an A+ on that paper, and that was by a retired Navy commander, was a professor, because at a Citadel, all the professors are military. I got A+ on that, because he said, I was just wondering,
Well, thinking about that, and you're right, most people have no idea where the numbers come from in itself. They assume that there was this and X many bodies, but now, oftentimes, like you mentioned, no bodies. There's evidence, but you got no idea.
No. And I'm sure promotions were generated off some of that.
Most certainly, and we had an interesting conversation about that last
Yeah,
night that we won't delve into right now.
Exactly.
However,
Yep.
from your time in country, what time frame wise from when you arrived to Charlie Company and your first firefight happens, what are we looking at?
It was quick. And I didn't know how I was going to react. And Douglas had just made me M79 man. So I just stayed on his right, and he was good. I just stayed on his right hip the whole time. And I don't want to make myself that bigger than life, but bad term too, but it was exhilarating. It was almost a excitement, because all of a sudden you feel like, this is surreal. That's the way I felt. And from that point on, Douglas and I were pretty tight, because he knew that wherever he was going to be, I was going to be right next to him. So I'm not to be bragging.
No, you're not at all.
But I had a different feel for it.
Well, and quite a few guys I've talked to mention that exhilaratingness in itself because, as a Marine, day one, you're trained that every Marine's a rifleman. And
Mm-hmm.
that at this point, what is a Marine rifleman trained to do? And it's brought up to you in so many aspects of the fraternity of the Marine Corps when you get there in itself. Absolutely. Now, as the M79 man, you've got an important role as well.
You
So,
do. I mean, because you've got one weapon that you can really treat it like a mortar tube, or you can shoot it straight on like a shotgun. You got an enormous number of different rounds, and I carried a lot of rounds. I had 2 bags that would hang in front of me because those rounds are big, 40 millimeter. And I had 2 bags that kind of balanced because I had the pack on the back and the 2 bags in the front. Keep me. Now, if we were on a patrol, I wouldn't take all those rounds. Yeah.
well, for your ammunition in itself, you carried the 40 mic, of course, the HE rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Would you carry any shotgun rounds as well?
Yes, I did. They were called buckshot rounds, and you screw the top of it off, and it had like 6 chambers, and the pellets weren't like what you'd see in a normal shotgun shell. They were bigger, and it was very effective because you couldn't carry shotguns in Vietnam. You weren't supposed to. I'm not saying some did carry shotguns, but it was against the rules.
Well, and with that mindset being said of the effectiveness of the M79, the ammo you carry, but you're also carrying a flak jacket. You've also got your pack in itself.
Mm-hmm.
How much weight are we talking about total?
I've always wondered that myself, and I really have no idea. But I'll say you got all your C rations. You know, when you pack up, you got to kind of think, well, how long are you going to be out there? And a meal that would pretty much fill you up, and you could get away with that. Lots of times you just do it once a meal. I mean, once a day you get a meal. That's when you set in, then you pick out your rations, and then you got your laws, right? Anti-tank assault weapons, and they're fiberglass, and they're about this big and about that big around, and they telescope out, which you replace the 351.
And those are your one use, right? Once you shoot it and that tube's
It's
done.
done.
Yeah.
And you might carry 1 or 2 of those, and then you got your frags, and then you got your if you carry an M16, you got your magazines, and you have like 20 of those. You got your water. Now that was really heavy because in the summer I carried multiple canteens, and I had like a rope that I had strung through the canteens to carry off the back. So then you get your C rations, and now you don't have an extra set of clothes and a toiletry kit and all that. You had utilities that you had on. You slept on. You kept your boots on. You never took your boots off, and you just laid down on the ground, unless you were digging in, and that was it for that. But that pack was pretty heavy. The packs were small, so you had to cram stuff into them. You had your poncho liner. You had your poncho, and I could go on. Now you're realizing how much weight you're carrying. And then you got your, for M79 man, you got your rounds, and you got pack on your back, balancing you. We said have your insect repellent, which we thought was kind of like more of an attraction to the mosquitoes and a deterrent. So that's a lot of weight. I don't know. I probably, like I said, I weighed maybe 140, 145 pounds. What I was carrying was my weight, if not more.
Well, in the monsoon season too, it gets heavier because all
It
that
does.
water, and
It
it
does.
doesn't matter even with a poncho liner in itself,
Nah.
you're getting wet regardless.
And here's the kicker. You ride home, send me a rain suit. Well, rain suits lasted about 1 day out there. I mean, the elephant grass, the terrain would just tear it up. Not to mention the condensation that you get from being hot, and so it was no go. You had your poncho, and that was as good as it was going to get. That was as dry. You weren't dry. You were not going to be dry.
Well, and thinking of that too, with that climate and that humidity and that rain, those utilities, they rip, they tear, they rot out fast.
Mm-hmm.
And as you and I have talked, for whatever reason being, there was no fresh clothes that were coming in itself. Poorly supplied, flak jackets rotting out.
Yeah, you can see some of the tears in some of these guys because you didn't wear underwear. You just did. That would have been dumb. So you get torn up, and the only way you get new ones if you by chance went to the rear. It gave you a chance to pick up some utilities. Other than that, just I'm still wondering what we actually did when they got torn real bad, but I guess we figured it out.
Well, and all of that being said, and thinking of it, there were times out there where the weather sucks in. You can't get birds in,
Uh-huh.
so you can't get fresh water. At times you run out of sea rations in itself, and you got to wait till the weather clears, but you still have a job to do. Somebody from
Mm-hmm.
battalion is pushing you to continue to that next checkpoint. So, from your perspective, mentally, how do you go on out there when you're hungry, you're thirsty?
It's a new experience, uh, and you can relate on right away with people that's their constant state, and it's like, wow, now I know what it feels like. And during the heat season, lots of times these maps would show stream beds. The heat season, they may or may not be there, and that was your next uh, opportunity to get water and fill up your canteens. And you get that was really disappointing when you get to a dry stream bed and you're low on water or don't have any water. And it's a feeling you can't imagine what it feels like unless you've been that hungry and that thirsty. And so many people in the world are that way. It's like you think, God, how do they manage? And you'd get really hungry. And some guys just required less food, less sea ration. But they were few and far between. The most of us, man, was like, God, man, I gotta get some chow. I gotta get some water.
Well, and at that point, with that that desire for food, you'll eat any sea ration,
Oh
regardless
yeah.
of what it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It all tasted good. The best thing you could get from home was hot sauce and anything that you could spice up your food, your sea rations with. But you always look for a bottle of hot sauce just to
and
change the taste of it.
and it made a difference.
It did.
And for you guys out there in the bush on these patrols in itself that are happening, and we're VCB, you might move down to Quaviet in itself, moving
Mm-hmm.
around. So as these operations continue on in '68, as it leads on, you've got different officers coming into play in itself. You've got new guys coming in and too, rotating back home. So for you, what's going on through your point of view in that mid to late '68 period as we start getting into the '69 year?
Well, we would get. My mom kind of kept me up with letters about how things were going on back home, as far as the politicians and whether the bombing was going to stop or it was going to start. And I remember when Nixon stopped the bombing. Well, we were on the DMZ, so we were going to be the first ones to feel it. Because when the bombing started, they gave the NVA more opportunities. So that type of thing you would get if you're back home was letting you know that was what's going on because we had no other media opportunities to find out about anything. You didn't even know what month it was unless you looked at your helmet because you put the months. Lots of guys would put their months on. And they cross out as they went along. And the mail was helter skelter. That was as good as food because you're out in the bush every once in a while. They chop her in and they drop the bag of mail, and that was really great. You get those letters to reinforce things, but you really didn't know what was going on unless somebody from back in the States was telling you. You had no other source information, so you didn't know if we were winning, losing, or indifferent. We knew what was going on the ground per se, and it was like rock-a-mole. You hit here, and you're familiar with Hill 44. Yeah, we took that hill. We had to take it twice, but it had been taken back. That was history. On Myers Ridge and Ashall Valley, that whole area. It was just a repeat of here, and then go back over here and take this. We never held on to anything unless we put artillery on it. Quezon was a good example of that. That was a total disaster. That was a decision made by the uppers that was a mistake from the get-go.
Well, and in many ways too, a lot of the faults in Vietnam, it's not from the grunts, the platoon leaders, the company commanders per se on the ground. A lot of it comes from the upper chain of command, people who have no idea what's actually going on out there in the field or in the bush because they're in a comfortable air-conditioned office.
Right. Exactly. And lots of times when it was a battalion size operation, unless it was a few of the disasters that we had, they didn't feel it. It was like them being back home as close as they could be. It was a different lifestyle. I talked to guys from the Air Force and the Navy pilots and whatnot. Matter of fact, I played golf down there in Carolina. I say down here in Carolina, here we are. But he was a pilot over there. It was interesting talking to him, what he thought. But the thing that's great is the appreciation the other armed forces that weren't down on the ground, the grunts, have for what we did, what we were trying to do. It's recognition.
Well, and even with that recognition, a lot of it comes from the combined arms aspect of a lot of the operations that you guys are on in itself. Up along the DMZ, you get into a pretty heavy firefight. You got to call in an airstrike, whether it be Navy, Air Force in itself. And those guys up there know that there's troops in contact on the ground that need their support in itself. And so you've got that amplified. You've got the Navy offshore per se in itself. However, oftentimes though, where Charlie Company is operating at, the weather's so poor that doesn't always work, or you're out of the range of artillery.
In one particular instance, they canceled the AO and the FO canceled our support. So we had no artillery support and no air support because the decision was made back then. But I do want to throw this in, and I talk about it all the time. I've got a buddy down in Hertford that was on a chopper. He was gunner, and it was Army. I said, you guys with your choppers, the warrant officers, young warrant officers, were amazing. They would bring that chopper, and it might be hitting the elephant grass. They didn't care. They were coming in. They were going to get you out. Those guys did a super job. Super job.
Well, you find that LZ big enough for any of those birds, there were ones that had the wheel would get in it itself.
Yep, they'd find a way.
A lot of it times under fire too.
Yep. Oh yeah, it's amazing what they did. I mean, we had one chopper, one particular, and it didn't result in a firefight, which really surprised us. But our chopper was coming down, and the NVA had set up bamboo poles to support the tripwires, so it made an X. So when the chopper hit the tripwire, it blew up, and it blew up underneath the chopper. But we had extra plates under the chopper, so it didn't any of it come through the bottom of the chopper. What it did is it went through the props, and that meant we were down. That chopper wasn't going anywhere, and that LZ was only room for one chopper. So now we're stuck, and the hill that we're on was booby trapped. I mean, that's where Harry Wright, folks know his name, he was exploring, and actually we tripped one of the booby traps. And but other than that, we had no, which surprised us, no action. We just ended up setting a perimeter. But the chopper pilots, that's the type of stuff they had to put up with all the time. And finally, the other squad, and you were talking to Don, the other squad, they pretty much, that chopper kind of had, like on the edge, like where the cliff went down, so the guys could get off the chopper. So there's no other way of reinforcing us or getting out of there. But those chopper pilots, my hat's off to them.
Well, in a war like Vietnam, you need the skill of chopper pilots so troops on the ground can survive, get out of those LZs, get food, get water. Because how else do you get it to them? There's no front line.
I would have liked to have gotten to know some of them on a personal basis, like after Vietnam, talk to them. Of course, Ronnie Ray, he's a good old Carolina boy. He'll talk about it. And, he was, like I said, it was funny because he said, when I was going to recruit, he said, I had mechanical abilities, and they told me I was going to be a mechanic. I was going to be fixing choppers. He said, I got everything. Went, no, you're a door gunner. He said, I worked myself up to crew chief. He said, because I did have mechanic, I had to keep the birds in the air. He said, but that was a surprise for me.
Well, I mean, similar to yourself, your MOS is 0351. You get into the country and you're like, no, here's the M16 in itself. Here's the M79. And it's where you were needed, not what your MOS was.
Absolutely. And, as I talked to some SEALs, and they talk about their activities in Vietnam, to me, I think it was a really separation. I think the SEALs were down on the Mekong Delta, and we had the Force Recon, because we did see Force Recon from time to time. A lot of appreciation for those Force Recon guys.
Well, and Force Recon in itself, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the activities and firefights you guys get Sparrowhawk to are because Force Recon teams get into contact. And we're talking 6, 7, 8-man team out there against.
They're on their own.
What size of the NVA in itself, and they need support. And that's where you come into play. Now, outside of seeing Force Recon, I know you saw some other things out there too in itself in terms of the wildlife.
Yeah, and we had a discussion about that. I never remember hearing birds and animal life like squirrels. We never saw that because it was just noisy all the time. We did have, and I will say there were rock apes, and the little buggers were just irritate the heck out of you. But there was one occasion where we were in LZ Shepherd, and from LZ Shepherd you can see where Caisson used to be. It was just flat, it had been flattened out, bulldozed over.
You got a great picture of that.
Yeah, I do. And I heard some down the elephant grass, down the slope. I heard some movement that night. So I threw a frag down there. And the movement stopped. Well, good. So we decided a week later we took patrol for the particular area. And there laid a black boar. You know? And we'd seen them from time to time on the other hillside. And I said, man, I'm good for one KIA.
It's a shame you guys couldn't have got it and barbecued.
That's
that
right.
night.
That's right.
Well, what other kind of wildlife out there? I mean, because, there's snakes.
Well, there were snakes and bamboo vipers. And you didn't want to get bit by a bamboo viper. But it was a regular jungle. I mean, we had panthers, tigers, whatever you want to call them. It's not like we had a picture of them or anything. But they did some damage to one of our LPs, and there's history on that. A couple guys were killed. Now, that wasn't common, but it did happen. But it was a jungle. And you had, I can't tell you if it was an anaconda or a python. Never went back to look at my wildlife experience. But I will say one night, and I don't tell many people this story because they go, "You're crazy, Matthew." But bear with me because it actually happened. I just wish I could find the two guys who were next to me to verify this story. We're on LP. If you don't know what LP is, a listening post, and it's a 3-man team that goes out beyond the perimeter.
About how far out beyond the perimeter?
You might be 50, 75 yards out. And this LP we were on, it was a cliff, and it just fell straight off. And we had made the LZ, so we pushed all the brush off to that side because we were getting ready to get extracted. And I had two guys with me. And on an LP, you can't say anything, you can't make any noise, so you communicate with your radio by clicking. A certain number of clicks means something, a certain other clicks means something else. And also, that's a perimeter know that you're awake. So we're sitting there, and I lean back, and I put my hand through the brush. That's kind of slimy. I put my hand through the brush, and I said, that's kind of slimy. And I looked at the guy next to me. So it was either anaconda, python, whatever kind of big snakes they had over there. It was underneath us in the brush. And like all of a sudden, we had 3 guys awake on because you like rotate one guy awake at the guy. We had 3 guys like this the whole night. Nobody was moving. And the next morning, it was gone. But I said, "Damn, that was a big one." But other than that, they were just in, like those snakes. Other than that, lots of mosquitoes, but you want to put that in the wildlife category. That were as big as, we thought they were as big as birds.
Well, going back, you mentioned being on LP. LP is a very nerve-wracking duty in itself.
Oh, it is.
Because if you get hit out there, you've got to let the perimeter know that you're coming back in. So you don't get shot by your own Marines, but you also have to worry where is the NVA at, because you're a 3-man team.
And if you had to come back in, you'd pop up a smoke that let the line know you were coming back in. Now, that could easily be, and it happened on Hill 44. The NVA got behind our lines, and the way they did that is as soon as they popped the smoke, LP did, the NVA knew that that was an entry into the lines, so they took advantage of it and came through the lines that night. The LP was a tricky. And it's not something you look forward to, be the chosen one to go on the LP.
Well, when you, not mistaken in itself, squads, platoons, rotate who's on LP in itself. To give, 1, everybody experience, but 2, you don't want the same folks out there in itself, just for what that could do mentally, I guess, out there in the bush.
Yeah, it was rotated around. and leadership knew that, and it would, one squad would be responsible for it, and the next squad would be responsible for it the next day. But they were important part of our perimeter
Absolutely.
defense.
Well, and when morning rolls around in itself, LPs are brought in,
Mm-hmm.
Lodge packs up in itself, continue on that patrol route in itself, and when you guys are moving on a day-to-day basis, how much ground could you cover out there in those mountains and with that triple canopy and dense foliage?
Well, everything was clicks. We're going to do 2 clicks and go back to the metric system, which this country never really completely figured out. We kept a two type system here, so they had to get used to that terminology. So I would say, depending on how the terrain was, you do 4 or 5 clicks, and I might be completely off. The maps did a good job of showing you the topography, but and it depended, because during the monsoons, you might gain 10 feet up, then you slide back 5 feet on the mountains. When I say mountains, it's not like the Rocky Mountains or anything like that, but these were mountains that they get your attention. I mean, you had to do some humping to get up some of these mountains. That's one of the reasons they called that one mountain rock pile, because it was all rock, just straight up. When we looked at that last night, the inclines, severity of incline on the mountains, it wasn't like here in North Carolina. It was more subtle, but it was tough because the terrain was thick. On some of those fingers, it was like you just had to work your way through the brush. And if you're on elephant grass, that was a whole different story, because the elephant grass was over your head, and you had to have a machete, and you had to take turns at the front just to chop down the machete, because guys get tired. The machete gets worn out, and that's where you get your jungle rot. And
Well, now that you mention it, what is jungle rot?
it's an infection of the skin. You get cut up by the elephant grass. And the elephant grass was like razor. It hit your, especially got your arms, and they would get infected because there was no neosporin or anything to put on it, and you didn't pay much attention to it until it got infected. When it got infected, it would turn into jungle rot. Some guys were more susceptible to jungle rot. They get all over themselves, and other guys had, I don't know what the tolerance difference was, but it didn't get it as bad. I still have a scar on my hip from jungle rot, but I still did not get it bad. It was just I was always on that side, especially during the monsoons. But yeah, some of the guys from Medevac down there got so bad.
Well, and when we think about casualties and in many ways the attrition rate, even when you're not in contact with the NVA, you got guys coming down with malaria in itself. You got guys coming down with jungle rot. You got guys that have dysentery, and then head squid in itself has to make a decision who can go out and who can't, and that then creates a whole nother environment of well, why can this person go out of the field but I can't,
Right.
or so and so. So
Right.
did you see any of that in itself?
Well, I did. I was part of that. It happened to me. When I got in country, I was given a pair of jungle boots. Well, they were 9.5. So I was fine, but I take a 10.5. So my big toes are screwed. And I tried to work it as much as I could, cutting them and taking a sharp blade and cutting to where it would have a little room for the toenail. They sent me back to the rear to actually have it cut down through the toenail so that I didn't have that cramping on my feet. But golly, it really made it uncomfortable. And that goes back to your uniforms, if you want to call them utilities. And they just didn't give you protection from your environment around you. But no, that's it. But getting back to your question, which I kind of deviated on that, the corpsmen, we call them ears, that was a term we'd use, would make that decision. And they were very good about that. They would try to do everything they could out in the field. But they'd send you back, they'd give you right. And I'm glad he did, because man, my feet were just crazy. Of course, I didn't stay back there very long. I have a picture, and nobody really asked, and I don't know why, but next to Canada, there in the rear, and I'm holding my leg out. That's because they had just cut through the toenail. No. But I wasn't back there long, and I was back out in the field, and everything was fine. After a while, my feet just got used to it. When I got back stateside, they actually went in and took the big toenails out because it was fungus underneath them.
Jesus. Well, and having these conversations brings up the point of what really happened out there in itself, with just the environment alone and the impact the environment and the terrain impacted you still today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we think about the terrain, Hill 400 and 484, a lot of people might think that that's feet, but it's meters in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about the area for Charlie Company, leading up to 400 and 484, because you guys at Christmas time were in Quaviet.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that?
That was like the Bahamas. It was like, that's where I met one of my best buddies, Harold Wilson. Yeah, we met down there on the beach.
How would you describe Harold Wilson real quick?
Well, he can't pronounce his own name. He says, Harold. And he'll tell you, I can't pronounce my own name. And he's got some great stories. And oh my God, you don't have enough time for me to tell those stories. But he put tears in your eyes. But a heck of a leader. I mean, gosh, everybody admired the guy. He's just one of a kind. I mean, you meet great people, and then you meet people that go beyond that. And I hate to sound like I'm just over exaggerating, but if you know him and his family, it's like, yeah, how do you explain this to somebody?
Right? How do you? I mean, my 3 years being here in itself, Harold welcomed me with open arms.
Oh yeah,
he's treated me like a long lost friend, and I'm grateful for that itself. But how did you and Harold get buddied up down in Quaviet?
Well, they had a show. They brought in a group from the Philippines, and they did the show. But we got down on the beach, and we had these rubber floats. And it was like, this is only going to last a week. We understand that, so we got to take advantage of that. And we were like, get out there on these floats, and we trying to run like we were the surfboards, trying to get in. I had a lot of experience of what a wave looked like, and Harold, he even knew more about bears. Okay. But we thoroughly enjoyed it. We drank a few too many, and that's where I picked up my squad leader job that Sergeant Monroe, had given me. And so we were about there about a week, and we actually set up in a Vietnamese graveyard, and you could tell because the graves were where the humps were. So it was kind of cryptic, for lack of a better word, to have a foxhole and then you're looking at a grave next to you, one here, one there. But that was the first time I went to a rice paddy. We did a patrol in a rice paddy because up north we didn't operate rice paddies. And I could see where that was really tricky. You're easy target.
Well, flat and open.
Yeah, but the Vietnamese were just walking around. That was another thing we couldn't quite get used to because the Vietnamese were out there and they were just walking around. It's like, okay, I'm not used to this because where we were, if it's a Vietnamese walking around, you shoot them. These were the villagers. Up north, we didn't have these villages. Very rare did we operate on any villages. We had the mountain yards. No, I'm sure I answered your question, but
no.
Quaviet was stateside.
Well, and with that, it's skating. You guys are listening to music back there. So.
Oh yeah.
So what kind of tunes are you guys listening to?
Well, I was a Motown beach music guy. And Old Bully was more Pretty Lady, the singer of that. Can't think of his name right now. He was really into that guy as a singer. And there was country. But we didn't get much chance to listen to music. Very rarely. We did. One time I remember it was L.C. Shepherd. And we had a transistor radio or something. It was hard to get anything in on the radio. But they played the song, May I, by Bill Deal and the Rondells. Well, that was Virginia Beach. I used to go to Rose Gallery to watch that band, and dance that band. And here I am in Vietnam. We got Bill Deal and the Rondells playing May I. I said, okay, this is stateside for a few minutes anyway.
For those few minutes, at least in that time, in that frame in itself on Shepherd, does it take you back to Virginia Beach?
Oh, heck yeah. Oh,
is that a good escape for the mind?
Oh, absolutely. Music was a good escape. And I remember when we were on Catapult and the song Born to Be Wild came up, and we as a squad got together and we were singing Born to Be Wild. It's a good thing the NBA they weren't close.
I don't know, maybe you scared them off with a bunch of Marines singing at the top of their lungs.
Born to Be Wild.
Well, so back at Quaviet, you are relaxing, but
Mm-hmm.
you also know where you're going. You're
You
going
do.
back up north,
You do.
and you have a new weight as a squad leader.
I do. And I had a great squad.
And so, from your point of view, what kind of weight is it to be a squad leader? What kind of decisions do you have to make that kind of go through your mind?
Well, I tell you, Scar was my comfort factor because he had actually stopped and taken time on this particular LZ and called everybody to the top to talk about using a compass, and using a map, and calling in strikes and knowing coordinates. And we'd been on enough patrols under his leadership that I felt confident I knew what I was doing. And I liked that position. So, because the guys that were in my squad, I'm not going to overlook anybody, but there was one particular guy, Steve Garza, that was awesome. And there was another one, Tex. He always said, "Damn, you put all the weight on me. You took all the weight off you and put it on me. That's what squad leaders do." I was kidding with him. And there was Ski and Huey and Renfro and Scar. I mispronouncing his name all the time. Scarpo. He was Italian, but they were all great. And that was a neat thing about one thing I really enjoyed about it. I enjoyed diversity anyway, and the diversity I think made us as good as we were.
Well, when you take those aspects of diversity that make us all unique Americans and you combine them into a squad, you can have one hell of a team
You got
to
that
bring
right.
that coming together.
Yep.
Now,
we could run the government like that. I'm not going to get into that. You told me don't bring it. I understand. No
hey,
politics
brother,
there.
no,
But
it's all good, man.
it
Well,
works. It works.
when you became squad leader, who were your fire team leaders? Did you keep the original ones that Monroe passed to you, or did you have a new fire team leaders?
No, I think Straight Steve was probably one of them, and Tex might have been the other our team leader. We weren't about. We were more all on the same level. They didn't want a distinction. Of course, it's a chain of command, and you have to know who's going to direct who. But I really want everybody to feel like we're here together. It's not this guy's like your commander, and you got to fall in place to him. You got to listen to what he's telling you. Don't get too big on yourself. I mean, you're way down here in the chain of command anyway.
Well, and with a lot of these guys too, they've been there for the same amount of time as you have, maybe a little longer. They got the same experience, and you don't want to separate yourself in that
No, you
because
don't.
you've got the respect,
Yep.
and you want to keep that in yourself, but you also want to keep those friendships too.
Mm-hmm.
So, what happens when you guys leave Quaviat and go back up north?
Well, then we had to readjust. Um, it was really after that. But 44 was behind us. We really didn't see any. I think we had the Long Bay operation after that, but we really didn't see any major firefights. But with that said, while I was there, Charlie 1-4, most of the Vietnamese campaign ribbons that you have will have little stars on, and a lot of people don't know what those stars mean. It's for each major campaign. Well, Charlie Company had four major campaigns. And as a grunt on the ground, you don't know if it's Purple Martin or Kentucky 2, or you don't know the name of the operation. You know that you're a part of it. And it might not have ended any major firefights. Because there was a lot of recovery and discovery of NVA ammunition piles, their tunnel systems. So it wasn't always, you weren't judged on a firefight you're in, but what did you find? What did you detect? What did you take? What did you bring back? And we did pretty good with that.
Well, and getting to the kind of touching on those points, especially when you bring up, Purple Martin. That is the period 4, so 400 and 484. And leading up to that, when Charlie 1-4 was going out on patrols, was there evidence of NVA movement and it increasing in the area of operation?
After 44?
Before.
Before? Oh, yeah. We had some operations that, and one in particular with Long Bay that I was talking about, where we had to come to a stop. And we had some flanks out. And actually, we had a friendly fire happen on that one. But you could sense something wasn't right. That's a funny thing when in a combat situation like that. Sometimes there's sixth sense kicks in, and it did for everybody because it all of a sudden got real quiet. And that's the first time I can remember we had the dogs with us, because generally we didn't operate with battalion. We were separate in smaller groups. But that time we did, and there was a conscious decision that we're not going any further. And if we had, we would have run right into a major regiment and be set up to take us on. And now that obviously resulted in some operations back up in there. And you probably know more of the names of the operations because you've interviewed so many guys, you know, and some of this you're going, well, Bill, I can probably tell you some of your operations you're on, and just listen to me because now I know more than you do.
Good Lord, no. Oh, well.
So some of that's a little hazy with me as far as the names and whatnot.
Well, a lot of the times, fronts at the squad and fire team, you're not being told the name of the operation. You're just being told going on Sparrowhawk, you know, bald eagle.
Yep.
You know, you're going, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Or we're going out on a company battalion. That's it. No more, no less. And you learn about it after in itself when you maybe read your read your forms, copies of what operation you were on. However, and I'll ask you a few more questions. I won't take up. You guys got to travel today. However, when February 27th rolled around and Charlie Company is ordered to go assist the team that's in contact, you guys board the choppers. Did you have an inkling that something was going to happen big?
I'm glad you asked that question because that was one of those, I won't say moment because it was lasted longer than a moment. We got on the choppers, and now there's just different versions of this. What I heard was the 9th Marines had gotten in trouble and were going out to help them. And the 9th Marines, I have so much respect for them because they got into more crap over there than any of us. So that's what we were told, or that's what I heard. And some people said we were in support of a recon team. I don't know. You know, just what you heard on the ground.
Scuttlebutt flies all over the place.
So we got on the choppers, and we landed on this small knoll. You know, say it was a mountain, it was just a knoll. And we had a funny feeling about this operation. Just the fact that we'd been sitting next to LZ for 15 minutes, that told you something that was going on outside. So we got on that knoll, and as a group, we started talking about what we were facing the next day. And we said, quite honestly, we were very candid about it. We said, you know, some of us standing here are not coming back from this. I didn't for an instant think that I was going to be one of those people. Because really, I thought I was invincible. And I convinced myself of that. But still, we knew some of us were not coming back. We had a conversation. The next day, we started humping. And we were humping towards Hill 400. Well, we could hear the fire up front. We knew we were in a firefight. But the group in front of us, to this day, I'm not sure what part of our battalion that was. All I know is we got to the top of 400 and set up a perimeter. And we didn't lose any of our guys, not in my squad or platoon, that day that I'm aware of. Something, and I don't think I would have missed any of that. And we got on Hill 400, we set up our perimeter, and it was quiet. I mean, there wasn't any gun. We were able to set up our perimeter, and we had started looking for food because we had dropped all our gear behind. So we didn't have our food with us. And this I didn't know, especially when we dropped our gear, 2 people that were left there to take care of it, which I heard one of them was Lieutenant Scar, but I can't see the reason they would leave him back there for gear. So there had to be more to that story. That's the part that I know of.
So who was the platoon commander, since reportedly Scar was left with the gear?
Noel was our platoon commander.
And he'd been there a short amount of time.
Short amount of time, and I didn't know him, and I didn't never saw him really because he was up there at a different part of the hill, and I didn't know who our platoon commander. I thought Scar was going to be the one, but I think I think Scar had been pulled back to Battalion. I think that's what that was all about, and that's why he wasn't up there. So we set up our perimeter, and well, like I said, we were hungry as heck. I mean, we kept talking about, man, we got to get off this hill, get some chow. It's funny, you're facing a firefight, but you're thinking about that pound cake and peaches, which was the only thing that was salvageable. Sea rations. No, check it. That was my favorite one. But anyway, so we set up the perimeter, and it was quiet. And it was probably some noise that night, but not enough to be concerned about. But then next morning, the fog would set up in the valleys. But as the sun came up, the fog would go down. And as this fog went down, the NVA knew where that fog level was, and they would make noise. They would harass you, and you couldn't see them. You had to be on alert. You had to be looking through that fog all the time. We decided we were going to make an assault on 484. And we got to the bottom. It was like it wasn't a deep valley, but it was a depression at the bottom of 484. And I'm going to find out, and I'm pretty sure on this, we had other squad leader was Alvarado. I was a fire team leader at that time. And Alvarado got message through that his wife had just had a baby. I said, all times to be told that. But we congratulated him before we took up the hill. And I never saw Alvarado after that. I know he lived through it. But so we're going up Hill 484, and I had a brand new fire team, and I didn't even know the guy's names, seriously. One of them I knew his nickname was Hollywood, but I didn't know the name of the other guy. So, because we'd just been thrown together. So we got to the top of Hill 484, and it was lots of times when we did ambushes, we made too much noise. This time we were quiet. We didn't make any noise. When we got to the top, we looked over there and we saw a couple of NVA on top of the bunker. They knew we were there. That was unusual. So Hollywood took his law, and it would have been perfect if it worked. But he sighted in that bunker, and he pressed the trigger. Well, I realized when it didn't go off what had happened. You have to pull the safety pin. So before I could say anything, he dropped the law down, he pulled the safety pin, and it went off. But it went off in front of us. And 0351 round is a pretty large round. So we had all the debris coming back at us. And he got the majority of it, and he couldn't see. I can't see. Before we could do anything, they started throwing chai-toms, which is Vietnamese grenade. Well, the other fellow and I were hunkered down with flak jackets, helmets pulled down, and the chai-toms were hitting close. Well, I'd say there wasn't like a dozen of them, there was 2 or 3 of them coming across, 4 or 5 maybe. And we kind of looked at each other with this look on our face like, we're done, but we can't do anything about it. The chai-toms were just, they didn't do scrap. I mean, so they really were not, we got little pieces of scrap from the chai-toms. So then the next thing I know, here comes Canada. He came up from behind us. He took that bunker. He took the bunker out. And then we progressed behind him. And then the rest of the day was just trying to ferret out where they were on the hill. We could see over there, Mutter's Ridge, we could see the NVA. We couldn't reach them because M16s wouldn't fire that. And nothing we had could reach them. And they knew that. So they're in plain daylight. So easy after that, you call in artillery, you call in aerial support. The AO for the air support and the FO for the artillery got an argument and canceled. So we got no support. So all day, we were just out there as an easy target. They were just dropping mortar rounds on us in RPGs. They were hitting Bravo platoon, first platoon with RPGs because they'd come up behind us. So they had us right where they wanted us. So that went on all day, and then finally, God bless them, first platoon got up on the hill. and got us off the hill. I got medevaced out because that's the water round that hit Canada, Skipper, Bully, and myself, because it landed right in the middle of us. So I got medevaced out, and my good buddy Craig Hoffman had gotten shot through one leg and actually went through the other leg. AK-47 sniper got him, and so he was up on morphine. He wasn't feeling anything. Cleveland King from 1st Platoon got on the top of that hill with all that crap coming in, and he directed that chopper in, medevac us out. And he got the Navy Cross for that, and he should have. And Canada, he didn't come out of it. I mean, I was lying 15 feet from him, and the corpsman did his best to help him. He didn't make. He didn't make it. So, sorry.
Okay, Bill.
So, Craig and I got on the chopper. We choppered out, and so I don't know much about I do know after we choppered out that night when the NVA came through the red lines. The hole that I would have been in. I'd been hit by the boat around, and Craig and I kind of leaned on each other to get on the chopper after Cleveland got the chopper in. Got behind our lines. NVA came, when the LP was supposed to come through, they came through and got behind our lines. And Lieutenant Noel and the radio man got shot. The foxhole that I would have been in, those Marines in there, since the NVA were behind them, they rode to take them out. And I would have been in that hole. So I was very fortunate. It's funny the way those things happen. And I got back, and I was able to get off the chopper. And it wasn't like I was in a wheelchair or anything. I was mobile. And they took me to Quantic Tree, the medical facility there. But before that, the gunny sergeant was on the tarmac. And he said, I heard Canada got killed. What I just did, trying to tell him, is what happened. I couldn't get it out. That was our biggest loss. And I wasn't there for the next assault on Hill 44. And so I don't know much about that. I know what I was told about it, and it was successful. And I remember we were in we were in LZ Stud, and they called us all together and put us in formation. And I think it was a colonel or something that came down to congratulate us for it. And I'm thinking, this is, and I had a negative feeling that I didn't feel good about any of it. And so that was, I don't think I missed any parts. Sorry for, I just couldn't get it out.
You don't have to apologize for nothing, brother. I want to ask and end on a positive question today. I'll pick your brain another time. But you got some R&R too. You went down to Quang City accidentally, I know, at one point too.
Oh, yeah. It was funny because when I was coming out of the medical unit there, and like I said earlier on in this interview, there was nobody on a bus or anybody to take you where you're supposed to go. You had to figure that out. So I was standing there, and this guy on a motorbike came by, and Vietnamese, and I stopped him. I said, I want to go to Quang Tri, where my unit's at. And he said, well, I'll hop on the back of the motorbike. So I hopped on the back of the motorbike. The next thing I know, he lets me off, and I'm looking at these. This is like a city. This is not a military installation. Then I saw these machine guns up on top of these ledges and lofts on these buildings. Well, I call them buildings, but close as you can get over there. And they were manned by Urbans. And I'm going, this is not where I'm supposed to be. And I'm walking down the road with no rifle, nothing. And I'm going, I'm probably not getting out of this. I'm gonna probably become a civilian before this is all over. So I finally get to a checkpoint, and there's a Marine standing there. He goes, "What the hell are you doing here?" I went, "I don't know. I wanted to get to Quang Tree." He said, "This is Quang Tree, but your unit is." He said, "I'm never going to try to explain it." He said, "I'm going to put you on the next truck that comes through here, and they're going to take you to Quang Tree." So then I was in Quang Tree, and after that, it was a Sergeant Moreau, which the great guy, great leader, spent a lot of time over there. He said, the leg is going to heal. There was some infection there, so they had to go in deeper to pull the infection out of it. And then they packed it so I could walk. And he said, "Well, since you can walk, you're going to take a squad." I said, "Come on, Sergeant." He said, "No, I wouldn't. I'm asking. You can stay back here to the sea heals, or you can take the squad because we need you out there close to a lot of guys." I said, "Okay." And that was a very proud moment for me. And like I said, he gave me a good squad.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal squad. Great group of guys.
Yes.
And to end this one out today, what brings you back to Marion, North Carolina when we have these reunions? When you have these reunions now?
Well, I had told Sharon a couple of them back. I said, "I've reached closure. I don't know if this is really healthy for me to keep doing this." And then I talked to Harold, and I didn't know Harold was going to make the last one because of his health. And I said, "I got to get back up there." And the more I thought about it, I said, "I got to get back there for more reasons than that." And when I do get here, I realize why I made the decision to come back, because I'm never going to get closure. I realize that. Seeing the guys, it's all about the guy next to you. And I'll tell you a really quick story. Jack McLean, who wrote Loon and Found, both those books, he was with 60 Mortars. He was living up in Georgetown. As a matter of fact, I had been up there because I was working up in D.C. and visiting him when he was in Georgetown. He and his wife at that time. And he said, "Well," and this actually is before or after? It was before. I'd gone up with Terry Tillery to see Jack and a couple other Marines. So we decided to go see the movie Black Hawk Down. And so here we are. We're trying to figure out what Vietnam was all about, why we were there, and kind of relating to Black Hawk Down. And there's no answer there. So it wasn't really about the red, white, and blue. We knew that. But at the end of the movie, the guy goes, "It's about the guy next to you." And I looked over at the other guys, and you could see the tear coming down their eye, because it was a realization that us being there and having been in a combat situation close to that's exactly what it was all about. And it hit us all at one time. So their reaction wasn't quite as drastic as me talking about Canada, because that just sends me off anyway. Just one thing in my life that brings up, other than her father dying. That's the whole story.
Ending on that note, every name that's on that wall from the period you were there, each and every single one of them. For you guys that come back here. So before I get to tell, always in my interviews, thanks for your service and welcome home.
Thank you.